My name is Renata Calloway. Everyone who still speaks to me calls me Nita. I'm 34 years old, and on a Tuesday night in March, I was sitting cross-legged on my living room floor in Portland, sorting through a stack of case files, when my phone lit up on the coffee table and did not stop lighting up for the next hour. For 6 years, my family had not called me. Not on my birthday, not on the anniversary of the year I left, not once. And then in 60 minutes, my mother, my brother, 2 aunts, and a cousin I hadn't spoken to since I was 28 called me 89 times. They didn't call when I needed them. They called when they needed me. But the calls weren't even the strangest part of that night. The strangest part was what my brother had found 4 hours earlier, and what I decided to do about it. Welcome back to Hidden Truth Stories. This is where we tell the stories people whisper about at 2 a.m. but never say out loud in daylight. The ones about walking away and about what happens when the people who pushed you out come looking for you again. If a story like this has ever hit close to home, drop a comment and let me know you're here. And before we go further, where are you watching from tonight? Type your city below. I want to see how far this reaches. To understand why one Google search brought my whole family crashing back into my life, you have to understand what I built while they weren't watching. That March, I was 2 years into working as a catastrophic claims investigator for a firm that goes after insurance companies when they try to lowball people after serious accidents, construction falls, industrial injuries, the kind of cases where a family's entire future gets decided by a claims adjuster typing numbers into a spreadsheet without ever meeting the person whose spine got crushed. I'm not a lawyer. I build the case the lawyers use. I read medical records nobody else has the patience to finish. I find the safety violation buried on page 40 of an OSHA report. I make insurance companies pay what they actually owe instead of what they hope a desperate family will accept. 3 weeks before that March night, I'd won a case that made the local paper. A warehouse worker named Daniel had fallen off scaffolding that should have been condemned 2 years earlier. The company's insurer offered his family $60,000 and hoped grief would make them sign fast. I found the maintenance logs. I found the inspection the company skipped. The case settled for $1.4 million. The reporter who covered it put my name in the piece. Investigator Renata Calloway, whose meticulous casework turned the tide. I didn't think about that article again after it ran. I had no idea it had already found its way, screenshot by screenshot, into a group text back in Ohio. At home, there was Marcus, my husband. Different Marcus. That's a joke I make with him constantly, since my brother is also a Marcus. And a 2-bedroom apartment with too many plants, and a life I had built slowly, on purpose, out of the wreckage of the one I left. I want to be clear about something before I go further. 6 years of silence is not a small thing. People imagine going no contact is dramatic. A screaming match, a slammed door, a scene everyone remembers. Mine wasn't like that. Mine was quiet. I sent one letter explaining why I was stepping back. Nobody responded. Birthdays passed. Christmases passed. I told myself I'd stopped checking my phone on those days. I hadn't. There's one memory that still catches in my throat more than any other. 4 years ago, I had a miscarriage at 11 weeks. I was standing in a hospital hallway that wasn't built for the kind of news I'd just received, and some old, foolish part of me picked up my phone and texted my mother one line. I lost the baby. She read it. I watched the little status change under the message. She never responded. Not that day, not that year, not ever. That was the moment I finally accepted the silence wasn't circumstantial. It was the answer. It said, "You left, so you don't get to be one of us when it hurts." After that, I stopped waiting for anything from them. I want you to hold on to that, because it matters for what happened later. By that March, I wasn't a woman hoping her family would come around. I had grieved them the way you grieve someone who is still alive, which, if you've never done it, is the strangest, loneliest kind of grief there is. You don't get a funeral. You don't get casseroles. You just get quiet every single day for years. So you can imagine how little I expected to feel when my phone finally lit up. To understand why I left, you'd have to sit in the back office of Callaway and Sons Auto Repair, where I did the books from the time I was 15. My father, Walter, built that shop with his hands and ran it like a foreman runs a job site. Orders given, not discussed. My mother, Diane, kept everyone fed and kept score of who had disappointed her most recently, which was usually me, because I was the one who noticed things. My older brother, Marcus, was allowed to be a person in that house. He could be moody. He could skip a shift. He could go to community college for 2 semesters, drop out, and come home to a plate kept warm in the oven. I was the one things were needed from. I did payroll at 16 because my father couldn't make sense of the software. I called the bank at 17 when a check bounced and negotiated with a loan officer twice my age, so my parents wouldn't have to hear the word overdraft out loud. When the shop's transmission lift broke and a repair quote came in at $4,000, I was the one who found a used one for $600 and drove 2 hours to pick it up myself. I liked being the one who could handle it. That's the part that took me years of therapy to say without flinching. Being useful was the only currency in that house that ever bought a kind word. Nobody sat me down and told me love came with a job description. I just learned it. The way you learn to walk before you know what walking is. Which is why, when I finally couldn't do the job anymore, it didn't feel like leaving a family. It felt like quitting a position nobody would let me resign from. The break came 6 years ago over a loan. The shop was struggling. A chain repair franchise had opened 2 exits down the highway and undercut every price my father quoted. The family decided, in a conversation I wasn't invited to, that I would co-sign a $110,000 business loan against my own name and credit and defer starting my accounting degree for 2 years to come home and handle the books full time. Handle. That word again. I was 28. I had just been accepted into a program I'd worked 2 jobs and a scholarship to afford. It was the first thing in my life that belonged entirely to me. I said no. Quietly, in that same back office, at that same desk I'd sat at since I was 15. My mother cried. My father didn't look up from the invoice he was pretending to read. And Marcus said the sentence that ended it. After everything this family's done for you, you can't do this one thing? As if I had been the one receiving charity, and not the one who'd been keeping the lights on since I was old enough to reach the light switch myself. Within a week, the story had hardened into fact around town. Nita's selfish. Nita thinks she's too good for the family business. Nita abandoned her parents right when they needed her. I didn't fight it. That's the part people rarely understand. I could have argued, sent long messages defending myself, tried to make them see the truth. I had spent 13 years trying to make them see me. Instead, I did the one thing that had never been allowed in that house. I left quietly. No slammed doors. I moved 2 states away, stopped answering, and let the silence they'd trained into me finally run in both directions. That quiet made them angrier than any fight ever could have. A daughter who screams is still yours. A daughter who simply walks away has decided you're not worth the fight. I decided that at 28. It took until that March night to find out whether I still believed it. Those first 2 years alone were harder than anyone back home would have believed. I worked a front desk job during the day and finished my accounting degree at night, and there were months I ate rice and eggs for dinner 4 nights running because tuition came first. I didn't tell a single person back in Ohio how close to the edge I sometimes was, because some stubborn part of me needed them to never get the satisfaction of hearing it. Slowly, one certification at a time, the front desk job became a claims assistant job, and the claims assistant job became the career I have now. Nobody handed me any of it. I built it alone, on purpose, out of the exact kind of grit that house had spent my whole childhood training into me. Just finally pointed somewhere that was mine. So, back to the coffee table, back to the phone. The first thing that came wasn't a call. It was a text from a number I hadn't seen in 6 years. One I'd unblocked in a weak moment 2 winters ago and never blocked again. My brother Marcus. No, hey. No, it's been a while. Just a link. Blue, cold, sitting there under his name like a subpoena. I didn't open it right away. I want credit for that. I sat with it for almost 10 minutes, my coffee going cold beside my case files, my husband upstairs, unaware anything had shifted in the house. And while I sat there, something else happened. I was still, technically, a member of the extended family group chat, muted, buried 3 folders deep in my notifications, a ghost nobody remembered to remove. That night, some old instinct made me open it. It was erupting. 40, 50 messages in the last 15 minutes. My mother, my Aunt Carol, my cousin Beth, all typing over each other. The little dots blinking and disappearing and blinking again. I couldn't read most of it. They'd started a separate thread I wasn't part of. But I watched the old one churn, alive, frantic. And then all at once it stopped. Every dot vanished mid-sentence. A chat that had been boiling for 15 minutes went completely silent, like a room where someone had just walked in and said something that made everyone stop talking at once. I sat in my quiet apartment and felt the first cold thread of dread work its way down my spine. Something had happened. Something big enough to silence a family that had never once, in my entire life, run out of things to say. And the only clue I had was one blue link I still hadn't opened. If you've ever been the one your family only remembered when they needed something, tell me in the comments. Were you the one who had to handle it too? My husband came downstairs because he heard my breathing change before I said a word. He's a steady man, my Marcus. He sat next to me on the floor and asked who it was. I said, "My brother." He knows exactly what that means for me, so he didn't say anything hopeful. He just waited. In that pause, I looked around my own living room, like I was seeing it from somewhere outside myself. The mismatched mugs that were mine and only mine. The case files with my handwriting in the margins. The plants I'd kept alive for 3 years running. 6 years it had taken me to build a life this quiet. 6 years to reach a place where my phone was a tool and not a threat, where nobody could reach through the screen and pull something out of my chest without asking. I had one clear thought sitting there. Whatever was behind that link had weight, and if I touched it, that weight would try to become mine to carry. That's how it had always worked. Their emergencies had gravity, and I had spent 13 years of my childhood and 6 years of my adulthood learning how to stand outside the pull of it. My husband said gently, "You don't have to look tonight." He was right. I could have deleted it, blocked the number again, gone to bed, kept the life I'd built untouched. That was the smart move. The one 6 years of practice had trained me to make. I lasted about 11 minutes. The link opened to our county's local news site. The headline read, "Local investigators' casework secures $1.4 million for injured warehouse worker." There was a photo of me outside the courthouse in the navy blazer I wear to depositions, half smiling, the way you smile when a photographer catches you off guard. Marcus, my brother, hadn't written a single word with the link. He didn't need to. I understood the whole thing in one breath. He hadn't gone looking for me because he missed me. He hadn't typed my name into a search bar wondering how I was doing, hoping I was well. He'd been searching for something else entirely, and he'd found me instead. And what he'd found wasn't a sister. It was a resource, an investigator, a woman who apparently knew how to make insurance companies pay out 7 figures, a woman who happened to still share his last name, who happened, in their version of the story, to owe them. That's why the group chat went dead silent. For 6 years, they had told each other a story about me, selfish Nita, cold Nita, the one who abandoned the family over her own ambition. And that article had just detonated the story in real time. You cannot call a woman a failure while looking at the headline about her winning a family, $1.5 million. So they went quiet, all at once, to rewrite me from villain to asset before anyone had to say the quiet part out loud. I set the phone down. It was still warm in my hand. Then, right there on the coffee table, it started to ring. Not a text, a call. Then a second one, stacking behind the first before I could even reach for it. I didn't answer. I sat on my living room floor and watched the missed call counter climb. My mother. An unknown local number? My Aunt Carol? Another unknown. My cousin Beth. My brother again. A number with an area code I recognized from childhood that I didn't have saved at all. They came in waves, one call ending, another beginning before the screen could even settle. Voicemails stacked up like planes I refused to let land. My husband sat beside me, and neither of us said anything, because there was something genuinely unsettling about the sheer volume of it. A whole extended family, suddenly desperate to reach the woman they hadn't needed in 6 years. The counter passed 20, past 40. My husband finally said, "Nita, what is going on?" And I told him the truth. I don't know yet. Because nobody had told me anything. That's the detail that still gets me when I think back on it. 89 times my phone rang that hour, my family reaching for me with both hands across 6 years of silence, and not one of them, not in a single voicemail, led with why. Not one said, "We're sorry, we've missed you, here's what's wrong." The calls weren't an apology arriving late. They were a demand arriving early, and I could feel it in the rhythm of them. Insistent, entitled. The way you pound on a door you're certain has to open for you eventually. I finally turned the ringer off. Not because I'd decided anything, but because I couldn't think with a phone screaming that my family suddenly loved me now that I was useful. In the quiet that followed, One voicemail sat at the top of the pile. From my mother. That one I played. Her voice came out smaller than I remembered, worn at the edges. She said my name twice, the way you test whether a bridge will hold your weight. Then she got to it. My father had been hurt at the shop. A lift had failed. The same kind of aging equipment I used to patch together with used parts because we couldn't afford new. And it had come down on his leg and pelvis. He was alive. He was in surgery for the second time in 4 days. And the insurance company, covering the shop's liability, was offering a settlement that wouldn't come close to covering what was ahead of him. Rehab, lost income, a wheelchair ramp, months, maybe years of care. That landed somewhere deep and old in me, and I had to put a hand flat on the coffee table to steady myself. But it was the next part of the voicemail that told me exactly where I stood. 6 years and 1 accident later, my mother did not say, "We want you home." She did not say, "Your father's been asking for you," or "We were wrong," or "Please." What she said, in a voice sliding from grief into something far more practical, was this: "You do this for a living now, honey. You know how these insurance companies work. You need to come look at his case and fix this." There it was. The oldest sentence of my life, wearing a slightly newer coat. They hadn't found their daughter. They'd found a free investigator who happened to share their last name, and as far as they were concerned, owed them one. My father's injury was real and serious and frightening. And in the very same breath, my family had looked at that suffering and thought, Nita can fix this for nothing. Second question for you before we go on, and I want an honest answer in the comments. If your family showed up after years of silence, not to check on you, but because they suddenly needed exactly what you'd become, would you pick up the phone? When it rang again and it was my brother, I made my first mistake of the night. I answered. I still don't fully know why. Maybe because he was the one who'd found the article. Maybe because some 17-year-old still living somewhere inside me wanted her older brother to say he was glad to hear her voice. He didn't. There was no hello. He came out swinging. The way he always had, like the fastest way past his own guilt was to get to anger first. "You're alive," he said. "Nice of you to finally pick up." 6 years, Nita, and it takes Dad in the hospital to get you on the phone. I didn't answer, which made him louder. I could hear the hospital behind him, the low hum of machines, a PA system paging a doctor, the particular exhausted quiet of a surgical waiting room at 11 at night. He'd clearly been there for hours. And into my silence, he dropped the sentence I would carry for the rest of my life. The one that was really the whole argument between us, laid bare. "Family isn't something you get to just quit, Nita." He said it like a fact, like gravity, like I had broken a law of nature by leaving, and now nature was finally collecting its debt. And here's what I understood. Standing in my quiet apartment with my brother's exhaustion crackling down the line. This was not a reconciliation. Nobody on the other end of that phone had spent the last 6 years missing me. They had spent this 1 week drowning and then found a headline with my face on it and mistaken it for a life raft. I said carefully, "I need to think about this." My brother laughed, short and bitter. "Think," he said. "Sure, he doesn't have time for you to think." And he hung up. That night, I didn't say no to him. He'd already hung up before I could. I said it instead to my husband, and to the dark ceiling, and to the 17-year-old in me who had never once been allowed to simply sit down and rest. I said, I am not going to sprint toward that family the second the alarm goes off. I did that at 16 with the bank. I did it at 19 with the transmission. I did it at 28 with the loan they wanted me to sign my name to. Every single time, it taught them the same lesson. That Nita comes when called, that Nita's help is a thing you can summon simply by needing it badly enough. My husband held my hand in the dark and said, "You don't owe them your career and your peace. You know that, right?" I said I knew it, and I did know it in my head. But knowing something in your head and feeling it in the part of you that was trained since childhood are two very different countries. And that night I stood with one foot in each. Because here's what kept me awake long after my husband's breathing slowed beside me. I know exactly what it looks like when an injured worker's family gets steamrolled by an insurance company that's betting on their exhaustion and their lack of legal knowledge. I know precisely how these settlements are built to look generous and are actually designed to close the file cheap. I could hang up on my brother. I found, lying there in the dark, that I could not hang up on what I knew. I thought about my father, a hard man, an unfair man in a lot of ways, but a man now lying in a hospital bed with a leg that might never work the same way again, being handed a number by a stranger in a call center who had never once met him and never would. And I thought about the difference between the two roads in front of me. On one, I stay away, keep the 6 years intact, and my father's case gets closed for pennies by a company betting on a broken family's exhaustion. On the other, I still hadn't decided by the time the sun came up, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever I chose next, I was choosing it. Not because 89 calls had worn me down, because I had finally, for the first time in my life, decided what handling it actually meant on my own terms. If this story pulled you in, subscribe so the next one finds you when you need it. And let me know below. What would you have done in my place? Would you have gone back to fight for a family that only remembered you when they needed you? Or would you have let the silence stand? I'll tell you what I decided and what happened when I walked back into that hospital for the first time in 6 years in the next part of this story.